Hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation. Hope everybody's here, making yourself comfortable. We've got 15 minutes and a lot to get through, so I'm going to crack on. My name is Brendan Walsh, and I am the Chief Commercial Officer here at Origina. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the third-party software support market. I'll focus a little bit on IBM because that's something I know more about. And we'll talk about the market. We'll talk about why people choose this market, third-party software offering, and we'll talk about what are the things you need to consider when introducing or discussing the third-party market in your own organizations. So, starting off with the market itself, for those of you who aren't familiar, and I'd imagine there are many of you who are already familiar with the third-party market, may already be dealing with some of the main vendors, including ourselves, I'm hoping. Last year, about this time last year, or sometime around July actually, Gartner issued its first market guide for the third-party support market, and that was indicative of the maturity of the market that Gartner was writing about the market. It's certainly been talking about the market at various events, but it's the first and only guide that's available to organizations who are investigating this space. And Origina feature in that guide, as do other organizations such as Rimini Street in relation to SAP and Oracle, and Spinnaker, Support Revolution, and others. Apologies if I've missed anybody, but the guide is available, and if you want a copy, I can send it to you. But the guide indicated, I suppose, the fact that there is a guide indicates that the market is maturing, and the market itself has grown out of, I suppose, a need from organizations to identify ways to lower cost in relation to software spend and software support spend. So the market hasn't just arisen out of nothing. It has addressing a need, responding to a need in the market. Overall, the third-party software support maintenance market is growing at around a rate of about 33%. When it comes to IBM, we're finding, because that's what we focus on as Origina, it's growing at approximately 90 to 100% in terms of organizations turning to the third-party support market for IBM software support. Of course, I suppose at times like these, and I know we're all in difficult times together, there is a focus on cost. We all need to sharpen our pencil. Revenues are down in a lot of organizations and in various industries until the economies recover, and so cost is going to be important. And in the IT sector, the second highest spend category is software after personnel and benefits. And so it's easy to see, therefore, that in order to kind of identify savings, IT software spend should be targeted. And in order to achieve immediate savings, or certainly at the time of your next renewal, it would be neglectful, according to Gartner, not to look at the IT software maintenance spend, and that's where we come in, and that's the focus of today's discussion. This particular guide focuses on IBM, Oracle, and SAP, but as many of the IBM legacy software products have been sold off to other companies such as HCL, Acoustic, SS&C, who have acquired legacy IBM software products over the last 12 months. Of course, you could extend the market out beyond the primary vendors to those vendors who have now acquired and are continuing to acquire the legacy assets of the mega vendors who are less focused on legacy and more focused on other things. So that's the market. I suppose, why switch? Why do organizations look at this market, and maybe what's a good time to investigate? Well, I mean, the rising cost of software maintenance is the key thing. Of course, organizations are looking for better support, faster response times, looking for the support they need, but of course it's obtainable at a far lower cost than it is from the mega vendors, and that is a key driver. That is why people switch predominantly in tandem with making sure that the support addresses their needs. When looking at decommissioning software, cloud migrations from the on-premise software to the cloud offering of the same or other vendor, or looking to replace existing on-prem software with lower cost alternatives, that's obviously a good time to look at the maintenance costs of the products that you're decommissioning or migrating away from, to see if you can put those maintenance contracts on hold or migrate to a third party to get the support you need at a far lower cost during that transitionary period, and indeed fund those projects with the savings that accrue. There are also many end of support announcements for all the mega vendor products that become end of support. In other words, the vendor is no longer going to support the product at a particular version, and they'll ask you to upgrade to the latest version or a later version in order to get support. That's a very good time to investigate an alternative. Do you need to buy the additional and sometimes very expensive end of support contracts, sometimes referred to as extended support or service enhancements? So that's a good time to look at, well, is there an alternative to those additional costs? The third-party market can provide an alternative to end of support contracts, and certainly worth looking at it then. The other thing you can do is, I don't think many organizations do this proactively. Certainly not. We don't see it, but it's worth looking at the value that one is getting for the contract that you have by looking at the case history. So look at the case history for any products that you have, and see, well, how many cases do we actually raise on what products? Are we getting the responses we need? Are tickets open for a long time? I certainly see visibility and evidence of tickets being open for months, if not years, with the mega vendor, the primary vendor, and never having been addressed. And you'd wonder why organizations continue to pay for maintenance. So look at the value that you're getting, and look at the ability as well to have increased cost and contract transparency when you make that switch. So there are some of the reasons why organizations, not all the reasons, but the primary reasons why organizations might switch. So when you're undertaking the investigation, obviously you're going to engage with one of the vendors, either if it was IBM, it might be ourselves here at Origina. And the first things we're going to need to determine is, well, what do you actually have? So you're going to have to look at that yourself. I'm sure you'll know from software asset management activity, you'll have a pretty good handle on what you have. But let's look at deeper. Let's look at exactly what you have by part number. Let's look at how many what quantities you have in terms of, depending on the license metric, and how much of that are you actually using? How much of that do you actually need? When is each product coming up for renewal? There could be different renewal dates. And when you have that, then let's go and talk to the IT architects, the platform owners, and understand what are the plans for the product. So there could be, it's not an all or nothing activity. You know, there will be different plans for different products. There may be similar plans, but they're all going to be different. And you can move at a different pace with the different products, depending on those plans and depending on what you have. That may be related to the version that you have, and also the migration or the transition activity. And then get key stakeholder buy-in. So you know what you have an idea of the plans per product. Let's talk to the stakeholders. So the stakeholders will be, you know, the IT architect, the CFO, the CEO, the CSO. Various people need to be you need to seek their counsel to understand what do they need to understand for you to look at this further. What are their risks, their concerns, what risks do they perceive, so that they can be addressed as part of the process. And you can start determining then whether the third party route is right for your organization. So let's look at the pros and cons. So having looked at what you have and spoken to the various stakeholders, let's document the pros. So, you know, on the left-hand side here are some of the pros, some of the positives. Obviously, savings is a key positive outcome. It's a minimum of 50% of your current IBM software cost, and can be higher. Various ways to reduce additional cost through avoiding forced upgrades and avoiding having to pay for additional end of support contracts, extended support and service extensions. Obviously, moving to third party, because third party market will support all versions, you can extend the lifespan of the product that you have beyond where you might otherwise bring it. So extend the lifespan and usage of the product, sweat the asset for a little bit longer. You also get enhanced service credit, service levels, faster response times, contracted faster response times, and target resolution times. Certainly from what I've seen, much more enhanced SLAs than you get with the mega vendors. As it says there as well in 5, escape those mandatory upgrades when the product becomes EOS. The third-party support market will support all versions. They don't discriminate on the version, and there's no extra cost from the third-party market to support those older products. And also look at, well, what enhancements might you need from the products? Where do you need to go with the product? Do you still need to upgrade? You can still achieve all of that without moving, and talk to the third-party vendor about how they can deliver those additional enhancements without breaking IP, intellectual property of the OEM, but give you what you need. And then on the right-hand side are the potential cons. You know, there are perceived risks, many of which I believe can be addressed. So there may be a risk of that you don't have access to future patches and updates. Now these are future, yet to be released, potentially yet to be announced future products. Of course, you're able to download and use later versions of the product than you might already be using today, even after the SNS expiry date. But you may want to consider, well, are there any futures out there that are worth considering? Are you in the futures market? Sometimes there's a perceived risk of not having access to the OEM vendor support. Now, also, again, it's a perceived risk because it's not absolute that you don't get any OEM vendor support. You may get it still for products that you leave behind with the OEM vendor, but just not for the products where you've moved to third party. But of course, the third party role is to provide that support. Understand your rights to supporting programs. The rights and entitlements for supporting programs that come with the primary program may differ, may change if you're not under maintenance with the OEM. So that's worth looking at. And then there's a potential risk of reinstatement. So, you know, what if you need in the future to actually upgrade to a product that wasn't available at the time when you switched? Well, then you'd need to look at, well, what might that look like, and do a cost-benefit analysis, including that potential risk of reinstatement. Not something I've ever seen happen with an organization having to go back once they've gone forward. They tend to continue to move forward, but it's certainly a risk that needs to be investigated. So ask the right questions internally. We have a range of questions that we can share with you that one might ask, but certainly you want to look at both the technical and commercial feasibility. So there are technical questions to ask and get answers on, and you also need to look at the commercials. So the technical things are around looking at the tickets, looking at your plans, what versions are you on today versus the versions that you need into the future. What are your plans for the products in terms of upgrading, migrating, transitioning, maintaining stability on an existing version, and what will the operational model look like? So talk to the stakeholders, as I mentioned, talk to the platform owners, talk to the IT architects, introduce the third-party vendor. There's no risk to doing that to those stakeholders to make sure that the tough questions get asked of the vendor. They have to be asked, otherwise they can't be answered. So ask the right questions. This is a model where we can illustrate for any organization as to what they might spend over a 5-year period, and we can demonstrate the savings trajectory. So this is a typical savings trajectory of an organization spending perhaps just under 2 million with IBM, and over 10 years they can save just short of 5.5 million by moving products gradually to the third-party vendor, which in this case ourselves, over a period of time. So this commercial feasibility is illustrative of the savings that can be achieved. So Obviously then, as I said, in summary, it's about, is it a right fit for your organization? In our case, do you have IBM? What do you have? Is the third-party market viable? Investigate that internally. Are the savings worth the effort? And do you have the stakeholders on board? Here are some of our customers. Happy to share more details with you later on during the Q&A. Thank you very much, folks. Enjoy the rest of the conference and see you at our virtual stand.